What we're gonna do here, we're gonna jump into comeback free brake service. We're gonna do brake service. We want it, whenever we do any kind of a job, we wanna do it where it won't come back on us, you know, or we won't have to redo it. And before I get started, I'm gonna turn my phone off. So my phone does not annoy me by ringing, because it always rings whenever I'm trying to do this. All right, so what we got here, the first thing we're gonna do when we're doing brakes is when we're starting on this, we gotta determine what the customer's driving habits are, right? So basically, we're gonna take time to find out what kind of driving to do. If somebody that's really an aggressive driver, if they tow heavy stuff, or if they haul heavy stuff, they're gonna basically need a higher quality brake pad and rotor. You know the rotors that we were putting on the other day that were really nice and vented and all this kind of thing, and more higher quality than regular rotors? You're basically wanting stuff there, that's so they run cooler for the most part. If somebody doesn't want brake dust on their shiny wheels, they may want a really nice set of ceramic brake pads. You know what I mean? So that's the deal on that. All right, so brake inspection is a lot more than looking at the amount of brake lining. A lot of times we feel like if we've gone and looked at, see, you know, with our flashlight, if oh, the brakes look okay, you know, there's more to it than that. And so we're gonna do a good inspection, unless the brakes are totally shot and they're grinding the rotors away. Like sometimes when it comes in, they're just going, and you know that's basically what you're going after, right? May not be all that needs fixing on it, but that's what you're going after. But if they're just gonna, like for example, Gene is talking about on his truck, he says he's feeling on his rotors, and he's basically on his rotors machine next, you know, couple, 3 days. And so basically when you're driving one, that one time, like for example, my son was working out there with Mike, and they had this Jeep that came in that had 4-wheel disc brakes on it, and they machined the rotors because of brake pulsation. And Matt drove it again after they machined the rotors and put it back on there. He goes, this thing's still pulsating just like it was. Mike looks at the clock and says, yeah, she'll be here in about 45 minutes, and here we are with our pants down around our ankles, you know. Well, they had to pull the rear rotors off and machine them. You know, kind of get to where you can feel the difference between the rear brakes pulsating and the front brakes pulsating. Now, if you're driving one that's got drum brakes on the rear, you can actually apply the park brake gently by, you know, release the park brake and apply the park brake and see if you're feeling it on the rear, and that way you'll know if you got drum issues. Now, you can't do that on the ones where the park brake's in the hat, or if it's done a different way, unless, anyway.
Do you do that here?
What's that?
Shave the rotors down or whatever?
Yeah, we do that. We machine rotors and all, yeah, we got all the machinery for that. So, you might be surprised though what a customer won't tell you. You know, like a lot of times they'll just throw you the keys and say, you know, fix my car. They won't give you the least amount of information. Now, does the park brake work? That's something we want to know about. You know, sometimes they'll have rusted cables, sometimes they're maladjusted, sometimes there's something else. And a lot of times on these Chevy pickup trucks that have those park brakes in the hat, not only are you going to put disc pads and rotors on the rear, but you're going to change the park brakes too back there. When you pull the rotor off, you'll see them. You know, the rotors are in the hat. And we change those a lot of times because they're usually worn out. Is the ABS or red brake light illuminated? Something else you need to pay attention to. Don't just assume that whenever you get your work done that all this is going to go away. You need to be thinking about it and keep it in mind while you're working on it. Is one of the wheels noticeably hotter than the other ones after a test drive? Occasionally, have you ever had that? You're going to see it where one wheel is really, really hot and the brakes aren't feeling right and all. And it's basically, what was it on yours? Did you?
It was on an F-250, and the other wheel that it was connected to, it was one things were pushing harder than the other one.
Yeah, you basically have caliper issues is what it amounts to. Tailor your service accordingly. All right. So if you've got loose front end parts, mismatched or worn tires, anything else that might cause a braking issue. If you've got two different size tires, you've got one tire that's low on air, you know, this kind of thing. Or if you got strange wear on there. Now look at the brakes on all 4 wheels. Notice the brake lines. Are they badly rusted, or are they routed through deep wet mud inside the frame rails? I've actually experienced that where I was driving a truck that I wasn't that familiar with, and when I hit the brake, the pedal suddenly gave way and went to the floor like I was stepping on a plum. Brake fluid squirting from under the truck. I get up in there, and where the brake line's running through the frame rail and there's dirt all up in there, it's done rusted away. You know, when those Volkswagen Rabbits used to have the brake lines running under the carpet. and there was a recall on those things. When I was at a Volkswagen dealership back in 1983, we'd have to pull the carpet back and see if those things were rusty enough to where they needed to be replaced. Because they were concerned about it, and I actually had one of those that the brake line ruptured on because of going under the carpet. And it, all of a sudden you hear something and your carpet's getting wet with brake fluid and you can't stop, and you gotta be like a gunslinger on that park brake. Slide the wheel. Especially if there's a big truck coming, you know, and you're about to go out in front of it. Check your wheel cylinders to make sure that they're leaking. If your pads are worn like that, that's a clue that there may be something more to it than just slamming a set of pads on it. How many of you guys have slammed a set of pads on there without even machining the rotors or replacing the rotors? Just throw pads at it. You know what I mean? That's not a mechanic's way of doing that unless he may be working on his own car. There's a right way to do stuff, there's a wrong way to do it, you know? Are the rubber brake noses leaking or swollen? Is it low on fluid? And are there leaks you can see anywhere? Now I'm going to give you a little qualification here. Even if there's nothing wrong with the master cylinder, you may see a little bit of leakage down on the booster. You know, right where the master cylinder goes to the booster, you may see a little bit there. Not a lot. I'm not talking about a whole bunch. Something else that can happen is brake fluid can go inside the booster. We'll talk about that later another time. All right, so some people will look at the rotors. Now, I've seen some people go over here and they'll rub their finger across the rotor and they'll act like that's telling them what needs doing to the brakes. Well, you can't really tell without looking at the pad lining and other things what's going on, just feeling of the rotors, because of the fact that there's sand and rocks and all kinds of stuff that gets picked up and trapped between the rotor and the brake pad, and it's not going to be a beautiful, smooth thing all the time. That's just all there is to it. I told you that phone was going to ring. Anytime I'm doing this, between here, it's going to ring. This is Richard. Yes, ma'am? Yeah. Uh-huh. Well, come see me and I'll help you out. Thank you, ma'am. She'll be knocking on the door in a minute. She's got a screw missing out of the manifold in a Crown Victoria, okay? Whoever that is, I don't know, it was somebody, you know. Did you leave the screw out of the manifold? No, I don't think we worked on this one over here, so. All right, so, let's see, some people just look at the rotor, there we go. Hello, come on, there we go. Do a good inspection. Watch this video. Let's see if I can make this video play. Now, well, no, I'm not thinking, well, is this a video or it's not a video? I got a video, I may have just a picture here in a minute. If the rear brakes are gummy and wet, you might have an axial seal or a wheel cylinder leaking, okay? If they're sooty like this, wash them off with something wet. Don't blow the dust with an air hose. It's bad. It's bad news. Check wheel cylinders for leakage always. Now, I'll show you in a minute how you do that. Dry sooty brakes can squeal even if the shoes are okay. Now, if somebody's talking about the rear brake squealing and there's dust in the shoes, in the pads, in the drums, I'm sorry, then you may need to get to wash it out with some brake parts cleaner, 409 water, anything you can do that's wet that keeps that dust from flying up and going up your nose. That's basically what you're after. Let's see what happens here. Right, now, what I wanted to show you on there, that video didn't play because I went from one computer to a different one. Sometimes that happens. Take that little boot. You know where your wheel cylinder is? Pull that little boot back and see if there's fluid in there. If you pull that boot back and there's fluid in there, you're going to need to redo those wheel cylinders. Got it? Or replace them. We used to do them all the time. I mean, we would actually rebuild a wheel cylinder. Check the rotor thickness and the drum diameter, replace if needed. Know how to use the tools. If you can't read the tools, then you're handicapped, whatever it comes to this. You need to know how to read a mic. You need to know how to read a drum micrometer. If you don't know how to do all that, there will be a final exam at the end, and you're going to have to do some of this stuff. If you have, you know, not been here all the time, or missed those worksheets, or didn't turn them in, or didn't take it seriously, or, you know, this deal, like I've seen all these people do all the time, they drift over here and I'll say, hey, what are you doing? Oh, I'm helping him. And then whenever I turn around, you know, they go back to standing around shooting a bull, just watching somebody work. Well, they ain't really learning nothing, you know what I mean? Anyway, but you got to make sure that you know how to do all this stuff. This is where you're looking up and you see what your minimum rotor thickness variation means. That if it's thicker and thinner, you got to measure like 8 different places with your micrometer and your rotor run out is basically how much of this you're gonna have, right? That's that little run out that they're talking about there. All right, this is me, wheat harvest, Kimball, Nebraska, 1975. The brake craps out of one of the grain trucks, and the only combine operator that can pull a wrench is the one they drag out of the combine and make him redo the brakes. So here I am laying on the ground looking like Robert Austin Davis somewhere. All right, with lots of frizzy red hair, okay? All right, now, do the job right. Uneven pad wear calls for an inspection of the caliper slides. If you've got some that are either worn crooked like a wedge, or if the one next to the piston is worn more than the one on the other side, it means the caliper's not sliding like it should. And that's when you're supposed to do these. Now you can get these little kits that will come with that boot. If that boot's busted, chances are this is gonna have a bunch of water up in it, it's gonna be stuck, and you're gonna have to fix that. And in some cases, you may have to replace the caliper cage. But the caliper cage doesn't always come with the dadgum slides. You got me? And all right. Now then, calipers and wheel cylinders, you can do the kit. We always rebuilt the wheel cylinders on our brake job back in the 70s, okay? So right now, you got the caliper kit, a lot of times will come with these little boots here, they'll come with those boots, they'll come with those seals. There is a caliper out there that everybody's supposed to tear apart and put back together. I think you've already done that, haven't you? Didn't you and Elijah do that? But,
I done so much stuff.
yeah, I've been dumping it all on you, haven't I? If the drums and discs are machinable, do it if you have the equipment. If they're not machinable, then you need to replace them. If they're too big or drums too big, just too thin, replace them if they're not within specs. Now, a vehicle that comes in with jury-rigged brakes should not be released back to the customer. What's wrong with this picture? Somebody just put some big old ugly bolts in there and just let them swing it around, you know? You don't come in here, if one comes in here all haywired up and barely holding together and you let it out of there like that, then you're basically now the last person that had it apart, and if it crashes, it's on the shop or you. You got me? It's better to disable the vehicle and make them come get it with a wrecker than it is to put it back together with the brakes not working right. You know what I mean? That's just all there is to it. And a lot of times they say, well, I don't want you working on my truck if you're wanting to put all that stuff on there. You put it back together and I'll drive it out of there. No, you won't either. I'll put it back together and I'll fix it where somebody's got to come get it. Even if you have to, you know, pull the fuel pump relay or something. Fix it where they can't drive it if it's got stupid looking stuff like that. Always fix the brakes right.
So you can refuse to do that? Like
Yeah,
they tell
you can. If the car is in your shop, and there was this one lady that had that I heard about a long time ago that had a little old lady came in there. She didn't want them to fix her brakes because she didn't like the price, and they said your brakes are dangerous. You're liable to crash. And she says, well, I don't care. I'm not letting y'all fix the brakes. And so they made her sign a waiver. She drove away and she crashed and she sued the shop. You see where I'm going with that? So you don't go there.
How can she sue him if she signed a waiver?
Yeah.
Because she signs the waiver and the judge says it doesn't matter if she signed a waiver. You knew that car wasn't safe and you let her take it. That's how that works. You see what I'm saying?
I told him, hey, I told her this. She said she didn't want to do it, so
Yeah.
that's her fault.
Well, then he says, doesn't matter. You owe her $2,500. Pay her up right now. Or go to jail. That's, I mean, I ain't kidding you. You can't argue with the judge. What the judge says, you gonna do. It don't matter whether you like it or not. Ain't that right? You gonna do what the judge says. You know what I'm saying? Don't say, I'll tell the judge this and I'll tell the judge that. Yeah, he'll clean your plow too, mister. Bailiff, take this man to the brig. You know what I'm saying? And don't let him out until he's paid that lady $2,500. Do drum brakes, one side at a time if you're not comfy with the springs. Okay? Don't be bashful about replacing the hardware if the springs are stretched or parts are worn or missing. Sometimes you'll take brakes apart, as some yo-yo did brakes, and he didn't know how to put some X part back on there, and he just he just throws it aside, puts it back together without it. See what I'm saying? And that's what happens sometimes. You won't say all this junk is in there. Or if everything is super, super rusty and the springs are weak, just get a hardware kit and build it up right. Okay? That's a good way to do it. Now, if the shoes are really badly worn, sometimes they'll be dug into the drum and you can't get the drum off. Right? So what you got to do is you got to figure out, well, this one right here is just conventional leading trailing brakes. You got to get your screwdriver, push in there, push that adjuster away from that wheel, use your brake spoon, and loosen the drums in. Don't get confused about which way it goes, or you're going to make them tighter than they already were. But anyway, that's something you're going to have to deal with. This rusty nonsense you're having to deal with out there, man, that's life. That vehicle's not that old. But somebody had it at Panama City Beach and we're all rusted up in the back. We got all kinds of hard work we're going to do on this thing. Adjust the drum brakes correctly for good pedaling. Now, what I mean by that is you want the brake shoes to be really close to the drum so when the first time you hit the brake, you got a good tight pedal and it's on the top. If the brake shoes are adjusted in too far, you'll hit it once and it'll go down that far, and you hit it again, it's up on the top, you'll almost think you got air in your brakes. But you gotta have those adjusted right. If they're not adjusted right and you know they're not adjusted right, you jack that thing back up and you fix that. Because basically you're gonna have to have it where it's gonna stop right the first time you hit the brake. First time you hit the brake. Hey, outstanding performance, I appreciate it. All right. This is a handy tool for adjusting drum brake shoe clearance. You check it here, you check it there. I don't know anybody that uses one of those. You know, you may see that on an ASE test. What's this mechanic doing? You know, they'll have a picture like that. All right, double check everything, and I mean everything. When you get too comfortable, that's when you start leaving stuff loose. And when you leave stuff loose, there's issues that take place. Now, this homeboy right here, he's actually using a torque wrench to tighten the caliper cage bolts. 118 foot-pounds. On that particular truck, it was 118 foot-pounds for the caliper cage bolts. Yeah, that was him. All right, so if they go somewhere else to get something straightened out, and they may have to if they're in another town, it's going to make you look silly if they say, well, if they left this loose, they left that loose, they didn't put that back together right, they put the calipers on the wrong side, so on and so forth, right? All right, with brake parts, you get what you pay for. When you buy cheap parts, you get cheap parts, right? I don't know if you've seen this brand or not, but if you have, stay away from it. Don't emulate the old cheapo deluxe. When you use cheap parts, you're gonna be asking for trouble, all right?
It says it for you.
Huh?
Cheapo.
Yep. Adam bought some cheap brake fluid from a dollar store for a really cheap price, and almost immediately when he poured it in there, the next time he looked, he noticed the master cylinder reservoir gasket was swelled up because it was cheap brake fluid from a dollar store that was petroleum based, which is not good for any of the rubber thing. All right, bad news. All right, so the banjo fitting on the caliper requires two washers. A washer on one side, a washer on the other side. You only put one washer on there, it's gonna leak. All right, the banjo fitting bolt is very hollow and easy to break. And if you break it by over torquing, the parts store probably won't have one in stock, and you may have the car down for a couple of days waiting for a banjo bolt. And don't get the smart aleck idea you're going to take a drill press and make you a banjo bolt. You need one just like what it's supposed to have on there. Pay attention and think about what you're doing. Bleeder screws, the rubber cap on the bleeder screw is there for a reason. It's supposed to keep dirt out of there. I don't know, at the times I've had to take a bleeder screw out and run a drill bit in it to get the dirt and crud out of it and blow it out before I could even bleed the brakes. Make sure you put it back when you're done. You may be the next person to bleed the brakes, and you may make trouble for yourself if you do something wrong like that. If the bleeder screw is clogged or stripped, you might need a replacement screw, or if the work's bad enough, you may need a wheel cylinder or a caliper, the total thing. If you put the calipers on the wrong side, the bleeder screw will be on the bottom, and you will not ever get all the air out of that sucker. So make sure that you put it on so that the side, the caliper, see that bleed screw, they put that on there backwards and up the top. When you're putting the caliper back on there, make sure you haven't twisted the hose. Because if you've twisted the hose, it's going to stretch it and probably destroy it the first time they turn the wheels the other way. Got me? So make sure that the hose is actually looped over there like it's supposed to be, because it's real easy to twist that caliper. When you take the caliper off, hang it on something, don't let it hang on the hose. It's a bad idea to let the caliper hang on the hose. It destroys it, right? Okay, now then, we're going to move over here. Keep the master cylinder full while bleeding the brakes, or you'll be starting over. Here's a trick I came up with. It's like a chicken house waterer. You got to make sure this Coke bottle is, well, two things to begin with. If you're going to put something poison like brake fluid in a Coke bottle, make sure that nobody picks it up and drinks out of it. It's really a bad idea to put something like brake fluid in a Coke bottle. Huh?
You gotta label it. The wrong person see that, you get in trouble with that.
Yeah. So basically what you need to do, or you can peel that label off, and you can basically put a skull and crossbones on it. That way they'll know they're not supposed to drink it, you know. But anyway, the point is, I take a bottle of some plastic bottle of some kind, and I took this picture out in the shop, turn it upside down, let it stand in there, and it will feed brake fluid in there as it needs it while you're bleeding them. That keeps you from having to lower the truck and pour brake fluid and pour brake fluid and pour brake fluid. Furthermore, it acts like a sight glass, and you can see where you are. You got me, bloop, 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 like that. And if you're really smart, you'll put a hose on each side, on each one, open all the bleeders, and just pump the brakes till all the air is gone. Sometimes you can do it by yourself that way. All right, when the bleeding the brakes, you gotta start it a wheel farther from master cylinder, work your way to the closest one, usually first, second, third, and fourth, and there'd be your master cylinder right there. There may be a big air bubble working its way to the bleeder that hasn't got there yet. Even if you're seeing straight fluid coming out, that doesn't mean there's not a big air bubble coming down the line, all right? However, make sure you know the right order the brakes should be bled in, and you may have to look it up. Like for example, this is the order for a 2008 Nissan Frontier. Right rear, front left, front right. See how it is? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's not what you'd expect. If you bleed them the wrong way, you'll never get a hard pedal, all right? If you don't follow the right order, you may be working a long time. Some require special ABS bleed procedure. Watch for this in a service manual. Some of them you bleed it normally, but before you bleed it normally or after you bleed it normally, whatever they tell you, you get in there, hook your scan tool up and run the ABS pump to get the air out of it. See, that's really important. Now this one right here is a GM service procedure for that. Now I have to pump the brake pedal, move the pads into the shoes into position. After you reinstall and torque everything, including the lug nuts, pump the brake pedal to make sure the pads and shoes are where they need to be. After you've double checked everything and double checked it again, double check and make sure all your bolts are tight, make sure you haven't left nothing loose, make sure there's not something out and dangling and all that kind of stuff. Don't move the vehicle unless you do this first, all right? Now, after you replace the brakes, with newer machine rotors, Bendix recommends that you drive the vehicle and make 30 normal stops from 30 miles an hour with a 30-second cool down each time to burnish the brakes. Get them seated in, right? These are gentle stops, not abusive panic stops. You know, we driving somebody's Mustang is to get to going to 90 miles an hour and lock the wheels up and claim you're burnishing the brakes. You're gonna go 30, 30, 30, remember that. 30 miles an hour, normal stop, 30-second cool down. Takes about 15 minutes to do it. This is a slide panic stop, this is a normal stop. Right here, at least that's what the picture is supposed to represent. Take this seriously and know how to do the work right. Okay? All right, now who learned something they didn't know?
I learned lunch.
What about you? What about it? You got that? Are you happy? What's going on over there? Zach, help her with that.